Hello and welcome to another Java tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to continue our discussion on LaTeX for Java developers. And in the past lecture, we discussed how to run terminal commands or command line applications from within Java. And we said that for that, we use the Runtime class. And the whole purpose of the Runtime class is to abstract away all that terminal interface. And it's a singleton class, which means it has only one instance per JVM, and then we use the get runtime to get the actual instance. And said if we want to run a command line application like pdflatex, the default assumption is that the pdflatex is on the path of the operating system, right? And then we said that if we want our applications such as Eclipse to be aware of the path environment, we have to open it from the terminal, right? And then we said that next, if we want to execute a command, a terminal command, we use the exec method inside the runtime class. And we said that the exec method has 6 variants. And then the return type of the exec command is a process that represents a native operating system process. And when you run a terminal command, launch an application from terminal, the operating system allocates a standard input and output channels to your terminal command, right? So the application or the process can output something to the terminal as a text, and then the user can input some values to the process, right, as input to your to the program. And we said that this process has an input stream which hooks up the output of the terminal to your JVM, right? So it's called input, but that's actually the output of the terminal command. It just feeds it into the JVM. So when it says input stream, it means a stream. It's an input to your JVM from the output of the console. And the process object has an output stream. That's the other way. That's the output, or that hooks up the output of your JVM or Java application to the input of the console, right? Terminal. Input stream reads the result from the terminal. Output stream adds some input to the terminal, right? Input stream is from the output of the terminal, output of the operating system, to the input to the JVM. Output stream is from JVM to the terminal, right? And we said that this execute has 6 different variants inside the runtime. And then let's have a look at this variant. A string command takes a command as the basically it's the full command of the application, including all of its parameters. Sometimes you want to say pdflatex on this text file, right? So this command includes both the pdflatex word, keyword, and a space, and then the name of the argument or parameter. A string array command array, it's I guess you feed it an array of strings, and it translates into the terminal command with all these parameters. So the elements of the array, I guess the first element is the name of the application, the terminal application. The other elements in the array are the arguments to that application. A string command, a string environment p. So env p is the environment parameter. For example, let's say you don't know if the pdflatex is going to be on the path. So you can manually append it here to the path, right? So a string array, command array, and then a string array environment parameter. Now these two are the most important ones for us. And let's look at this one, a string command. So that's one command that has the name of the command line application and also the parameters. And typically I use this over the string array. So I always prefer to create one string as the full command. A string array environment parameters. So I'm assuming that the pdflatex, for example, is on the path, and Eclipse or my Java process already has access to path. So I just set this to null. And then a directory, a file representation of a directory, and that's actually the working directory. So what is this? Again, when we run a terminal, right? Whenever you launch a command, let's say pdflatex, you always run it from within some directory, and that directory is your working directory or current working directory. And you can always check in terminal using pwd, right? Print working directory. It gives you the absolute path from the root of the hardware or hard disk to where we are, right? And then But sometimes I'm inside this directory, but I want to say that run the PDF LaTeX on some blah blah text file that is in another directory, right? So we give some path, for example, another directory / blah, right? So, and then the problem here is that this runs the PDF LaTeX on this text file, which is inside another directory, but the output of the application, in this case PDF LaTeX, is again saved in the current working directory, because the launch of the PDF LaTeX is with respect to current directory. We can change its launch by saying that actually I don't I mean, I guess there's really no other way to do it except we actually manually change the directory. We say that cd go wherever the other directory is, for example another directory, and then launch the PDF LaTeX with respect to that directory. But here this Java command actually gives us an easy way to tell the JVM to, when it runs the command from the terminal, it actually sets the working directory properly to what we already want. So that's equivalent to, in terminal, you first change the directory, you do a cd, change directory, and then run the command, right? And and we discussed a few examples. We said that we can check if PDF LaTeX from within Java. We can check if PDF LaTeX is already available on the path environment variable. And one way we do it, we can issue a terminal command, which is which a Unix application, which is found both on Mac and Linux. So I can say which, right? So its job is to search that application and gives you the path where it is. And the way it searches for it, it just looks into the path environment variable, all the folders that are on the path. So if an application, if a binary is not on the path, which returns an empty string, right? So that's one way, and we saw an example. So going back to Eclipse, to our test terminal class here, the first the first way to check if PDF LaTeX can be found is using the which command. And again, we execute it from the command line, right? Runtime execute. This is equivalent to running from the command line, and it returns a process, and we hook up the input stream of the process, which is grabs whatever the text is on the terminal and feed it to the JVM. We hook it up to a scanner so that we can iterate through it, has next, and print the. So if I run again test one, if the scanner, if this input stream has just some empty string, then it means it wasn't, which command wasn't able to find it, right? Let's save this, which means PDF LaTeX was not found on the path. So if I say LaTeX 1.1, this most likely is going to return an empty string. Yes, there is nothing there, which means now we cannot actually find it on the path, because the which command searches the path, all the folders that are on the path, right? And then the other thing is that we said that using this approach of executing terminal commands, we can do anything. For example, making a directory inside our working directory. And we said that when we launch from Eclipse, the working directory is a project folder, right? And then this creates a directory called testing inside this test LaTeX 4J project. And then the other thing was that there are some system properties of the JVM, and they are specified. You can send them when you launch your Java application with -d, whatever equals whatever, right? And the JVM considers this as a key value pair. You have the -d and then key equals and then value, right? And then JVM tokenizes these and puts all of them in a hash map. And you can actually get that hash map using system.getProperties. This returns a properties, and this properties actually implements or extends the hash map. So if we go top to get properties, it returns a properties object, and this properties extends actually a hash table, not a hash map, to be thread safe. Yeah, so it's a hash table or hash map. But then the other thing here is that we can do another way of checking if we can actually find the PDF LaTeX on the path, right? Because path is an environment variable. So what I can do is, instead of using the runtime, I can say system class, use the system class get env, and then this returns an environment variable or checks the environment variable. So if you look at the document of this, gets the value of the specified environment variable, and environment variable is a system dependent external name value, right? So I'm going to say path, and then this returns a string. So var path. If it cannot find it, so let's do a csat on this path. Let's see if it's able to find it, and if it can't find it, what is on my path. Let's run this. So this way you can examine the path, and on different operating system, the path separator is different. So if you're not familiar with what path is, so path is just a string that represents a bunch of directories, and we have something called path separator, and it's operating system dependent, OS dependent. On Mac Linux, path separator is semicolon. On Windows, path separator on Mac Linux, the path separator is colon. On Windows, it's semicolon. So I have one folder on my path, and then the other folder, right? And the separator is colon. And then the way path works, when you launch an application, it starts from the first folder, first directory, tries to find that application. If it cannot find it, it goes to the next directory, and this way until it reaches the end of directory. If it cannot find it, the terminal just terminates the execution, right? So we can check what is the separator of the path using our JVM. So JVM has a property, so system get property, and we're going to say path dot separator, right? And this returns obviously a string. All this stuff, properties, environment, they're all represented by a string. So path separator, and then let's do a sysout on the path separator, and this should return a colon to us. So let's run this. As you can see, the path separator comes out as colon. On Windows, it becomes semicolon. And then what I want to do, if I want to print the path in a nice way, I can iterate through it. So var all paths is basically path dot so path is a string split with a regex. The regex is just our path separator, right? And this returns an array of strings. Okay, so a split returns an array of a string, and then we can say for a string s in all paths, and then we do a sysout. So we print a new line for each of them, and this should put it in a nicer way. So these are all the stuff that are on my path. And if you recall, I said that the LaTeX typesetters are on Mac on inside library tech bean. Bean means binary, right? So binary, and also have, for example, JDK 15 on my path. So that's how you can check if the path, what's on your path, right? So if you want to see if you can access something, directly execute pdflatex in terminal, you can use which pdflatex. If it returns an empty string, means it was terminal cannot run this, which means it's not on the path. The other way is to examine the path directly, but then it doesn't give you the name of the application. It gives you the folders, right, that contain that application. So this is how we can examine the path environment variable, right? Get environment path, and then it returns a string. Get property path separator. On Mac OS and Linux, the path separator is colon. On Windows is semicolon. LaTeX binaries on Mac OS are inside library tech bean, basically tech binaries. Bean is stands for binary, right? All right, so the last thing that I want to say is that if you recall, we mentioned that we had this. So let's see. We said that if we create, maybe let me just create another version of this, and let's call this test 5. So what we said in the past was that we can run the PDF LaTeX, and I'm going to also create a new tutorial folder here. So tutorial _6, and then copy and paste the previous text file that we had to tutorial 6. All right, now we have a text file here. So here in this test 4, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the PDF LaTeX, okay, on this basically on this text file. All right, and let's see what happens. So I'm telling it, I have to tell it where this is. So it's inside. I know that when I run from within Eclipse, it sets the user directory or the working directory to the project. So I'm going to use a relative path to tutorials _6, and then let's also rename these. Let's save this first, and then refactor rename. So tutorial 6. All right, PDF LaTeX from tutorial 6. So we tell PDF LaTeX where the text file is, but then the problem is that the output of the PDF LaTeX is not going to be saved in the location where the text file is. It's going to be saved in the working directory, and from within Eclipse, the working directory is project folder, right? So if I run this, when it runs successfully, it's going to basically save the PDF file to this folder, not tutorial 6. So let's run this. All right. I can't find tutorial 6. Oh, that's because there is another folder. So LaTeX tutorials. Let's terminate this. And LaTeX is able to run it, so I can even run it one more time so that the referencing and labeling is okay. But now you see that the files are, or basically these are the output of the PDF LaTeX command. They are saved in the project folder, not in the tutorial 6 folder, which is what I normally want, right? I want to tell it run this text file and save everything inside the same folder that the text file is. At the moment, it's not possible to do it. Even if we use system.setProperty and set it to this folder, when we run from within Eclipse, Eclipse automatically resets the working directory, right, to working location test LaTeX version. There are also other ways of doing it. For example, we can set other and set this to resource location. Then it automatically sets the output to wherever the resource, which is the text file, is. But it's better not to do it and learn how to do it from within the Java command, right? Because different IDEs have different ways of setting this working directory, and then you want to learn how to do it from within Eclipse. So let me show you that PDF LaTeX actually ran well. Yes, everything looks good, but the output of the PDF LaTeX was put in the incorrect place, right? I want to set it to tutorial 6, so I want the PDF LaTeX, the PDF file, the auxiliary files, everything be saved inside this text, inside this tutorial 6 folder. But right now the working directory, when I run the command line command, right, it sets the working directory, or basically Eclipse sets the working directory to the project folder. So how do we do this? The way we do it using the other variations or variants of the execute that takes a file as a representation of the directory, and that sets the, when it runs the terminal command, it sets the working directory to actually this directory. So if your command has some outputs, it saves a PDF file, it's going to be saved in this directory. All right. So this is the most useful case of exec command, because then we can have the ability to also set the, and I have it here, right? So here what I'm saying is that I create a file which is represented, which can represent, or basically it's an abstraction of any file or directory on your operating system. And I give it the relative path, and the reason I'm giving it the relative path because Eclipse automatically sets the working directory. So I know what the working directory is going to be when I launch my application from within Eclipse. And then I want to say go inside this LaTeX tutorials and then tutorial 6. All right. And then text file, I get the absolute path of this directory. And then I'm using the file separator, and again, this is something that it's also a you can also examine it using the get system get property. Instead of path separator, you can say file separator, and it's platform dependent. So on Mac OS it's // on Windows it's // so I always use this separator so that it's automatically set based on my operating system. And then the name of the tex file, which is tutorial6.tex. So this is the absolute path to this tex file, tutorial6.tex. And then I create my string, which is a command, pdflatex space and the tex file. And now, again, if I run this, it's going to be the same thing. If I run this with the exec, again, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to, the output files of the pdflatex are going to be saved in my working directory, which is the project folder, and that's not what I want. So let me just show you that it's going to do the same thing here. And if I refresh, as you can see, these are saved in the project folder. Now, how do we tell it to basically, how do I tell it to change the working directory while it's executing the command? We tell it, we use this variation of the exec. So exec with this variation. This is a execute a specified string command in a separate process with the specified environment variables and working directory. So we can customize the working directory. So the command environment variable, I'm going to set it to null. So I'm not adding anything to the environment variables. And in the directory, I'm going to set it to tex directory, which is tutorial6 folder. Now the output of the pdflatex are going to be saved in this working directory instead of the project directory, and that's actually what we want, right? So if I run this, it's able to find the pdflatex, and if I refresh, now it works fine, right? You see now the auxiliary file, like file, and tex file, they were saved, and the pdf file, they were saved in the same folder that the tex file was, and that's typically what we want. I can even run it one more time so that the labeling is fixed. If I run this, as you can see, it works fine, right? So we use this variation of the exec command. Let me zoom in again. We use this variation of the exec command that takes the string command, right? And then takes a file which represents the working directory that we want to save the outputs of the pdflatex command, right? That's how we change the working directory when we run a command line application from within Java. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and now we are ready to continue with our LaTeX renderer class. Please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.